All right, what were you looking for last night, and what was America and the world looking for last night from this president's speech?
Well, first of all, we obviously did need to hear from the president. It's very late in the day. It's 3 weeks after Paris, several days after the attack in San Bernadino, and of course we had the president rallying the world to climate change in between. So it was, I think, just important that he actually took the time to talk to a nation that I think is suffering from a lot of anxiety, in part because they're losing confidence in their leadership, and their commander in chief seems to be really aloof and detached and without very many answers. So I think it's important we heard from the president. Unfortunately, I think we heard a kind of stay the course address to the nation, but everybody understands that the course we've been on is not actually succeeding. That ISIS is getting more dangerous and even able to hit us here now in the homeland.
Were you surprised? I watched all the coverage up here from Canada last night and heard everyone saying, we don't need a father figure. We need something new. We need to acknowledge. And the president really just kind of reiterated. Do you think that this president may have other plans in the future, or does he believe that this is the right course?
Oh, it's hard to tell what he actually believes. My guess, what he actually believes, is that he looks at this more as an actuary than a commander-in-chief. He looks at the statistics and says, you're more likely to die and you're falling in your bathtub at home than you are at the hands of a terrorist attack. And so what's everybody getting so excited about? I think he's completely out of tune with where the American people are on this. And he just has proven continuously unable to tap into that sentiment, to do so in a responsible way, but to do so in a way that actually conveys the urgency that people are feeling, and to give people a sense that this is his highest national priority, to keep us safe and to defeat this global jihadist insurgency that is spreading around the world and determined to hit us again and again here at home.
One of the surprising things, and he kind of admitted it last night in his speech, is that intelligence didn't see this coming. He called it a new direction. However, we've been talking about it here in Canada for some time. We saw what happened in our nation's capital. Similar situation, not the amount of death toll, but the same kind of heartbreak and the almost right in where our prime minister was. These lone wolf attacks or group attacks, self-radicalized, and people who are from this country, intelligence of the United States, had no warning. Is this frightening America?
Oh, sure. I think it most definitely is that you could have these kinds of people online, but not necessarily directed or trained by any outside professional terrorist organization. And yet who are able to acquire this kind of skill and capacity to kill this many people. I think that is terribly, terribly worrying. And again, from the president last night, other than a kind of irrelevant gun control proposal and a lecture that we need to be nice to our Islamic population and not discriminate against him, nothing in his speech that actually addresses what was either a massive intelligence failure or an intelligence black hole. And what are we going to do to devote the resources and develop the capabilities to get after that problem? On that issue, that critical issue, we heard nothing.
No, and
last night.
There is other news today about the intelligence reporting. Some are saying that there are inside reports that they had to fix the reports so that they kind of match what the president wanted to hear. I don't know if that has been confirmed anywhere, but there are reports coming out from the White House. And also, isn't there another report that was commissioned by the president that doesn't say ISIS has been contained? So lots of conflicting information right now.
Yeah, there certainly is. I think I have enormous confidence in our FBI and in its director, Jim Comey. I worked with him for a period of time in the Bush administration when he was at the Justice Department. and he's a straight shooter, and he is perfectly willing to stand up to the political authority and be straight with the American people about what's happening. So I feel some level of confidence there. The question of our intelligence and the manipulation, we've got this big crisis right now in the Defense Intelligence Agency and the people at CENTCOM in particular, and the problem of manipulating intelligence there and telling the White House a very happy story about the kind of progress we were making with regard to ISIS and changing the kind of analysis that our best analysts were trying to move up through the system about the kinds of dangers and threats we were facing. So I think there is a real problem there that we've got to try and fix and be very careful about the kind of story that we're getting out of our intelligence community at the present time.
The president looked a bit tired about this. It's one thing what politicians say. I'm also fascinated by how they look, because that's how we judge just about everyone else. If this is news that he doesn't want to deal with, if he campaigned and was elected at being not the war president and he's not willing to go there, then it's up to the next president. Is that a waste of time? Is there too much that can happen in the meantime?
Well, I think that's certainly the case, Arlene, that in 13 or 14 months in the twilight of this presidency, with America kind of rudderless and the Middle East really in a complete meltdown, I shudder to think at the kinds of bad things that can still happen. We've only had a taste of it the last several weeks, both in Paris and Sinai and Ankara and Beirut, and now here in San Bernadino. It can get worse, and it can get much worse. So I don't think we can afford to simply drift along here with a president who's not engaged. I think we've got to bring all the pressure that we can, and Congress needs to do everything that it can to try and get the president to do the right thing here. I feel good that we've got a Secretary of Defense and a new chairman of the Joint Chiefs that are coming up with new proposals and options. They understand that ISIS is not contained. They understand the strategy is not working. And I just hope that it's dawning on the White House the realization that if we suffer something like a Paris-like attack here, it could destroy the Obama presidency. And I think at a minimum, if for nothing else, then it's that concern about legacy, that we might have create an opening and a space here that our national security professionals can drive through to get the president to be a little bit more aggressive here.
Yeah, I was wondering there, everybody says this is a legacy politician, and that has really been the impetus behind a lot of his policies. Well, if he doesn't want this legacy, it may be thrust upon him, and that might be the way inside. Plus today, other news here, as I'm reading in the New York Times, the FBI becoming even more forthright about these two, saying they were radicals and they were radicalized for quite a long period of time.
Yeah, no, this is very worrisome, of course, especially if these people were just completely off of our radar screens. I know there was an interview with an Italian newspaper that they did with Mr. Farouk's father, in which the father said, I knew he was too supportive of al-Baghdadi and ISIS and completely obsessed in a negative way with Israel. And yet nobody in the family seems to have really told anybody about this and alerted people to it. I think that was the one good thing that the president did last night, is he spoke relatively more forcefully than he has to our own Muslim community here in the United States to say you have a responsibility as well, not only to come out very strongly in all your forums against ISIS, but against any interpretations of your faith that are inconsistent with our values here in the West of free speech and human rights and religious freedom and tolerance. And I think that was an important message that the president said, perhaps the only thing in his speech that I really thought was valuable and new.
Now, I have to ask you because part of the headlines today is a guy called Donald J. Trump, who's now, after that speech, calling on the United States to stop entry to all Muslims for a certain period of time. How do you analyze where that fits into this new scenario?
Yeah, well, I can't say that I'm a big supporter of Mr. Trump.
No.
I do. He seizes on obviously particular kernels of information, and he is actually someone, in contrast to the president, who I think is very much in touch with the national mood. But then I think he exploits it in a way that is probably not helpful and could have unintended consequences that I think make this fight against ISIS and our efforts to unify our nation against this deviant sect of Islamic radicalism more difficult.
Yeah.
So, but on the other hand, I would say that at some point in time, as we look through our visa process and our refugee process and the way that we take people into this country, at some point in time, you do have to at least start asking people about their attitudes towards this kind of radical Islamist supremacism, this kind of ideology that is completely inconsistent with anything having to do with American or Western values, and at least use that as a potential criteria to start looking at people that you want to admit into the country. I think the problem's serious enough now that we ought to have that discussion about the way we vet people that are coming into this country.
All right. John Hanna, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Arlene.